Uh, okay, you may have gotten a message that you're being recorded.
Got it.
All right, just give me like 5 seconds of silence, man, so I can take out my fan noise here in post, and then I'll come in and do the intro. And I know you've listened before. It's super casual, just back and forth, 5 to 1. If I have one of the ones that you have on your list, it's completely fine to have crossover. Don't worry about it.
All right.
Don't feel like you have to change your list or anything, so it's all good. Had to get some coffee, man. All right, I'll be right back.
All right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Two Peas on a Podcast. I'm so thrilled that you joined us again this week. This is Gerald here with you, of course. And I got to bring in a guest host like I do every single week, another P on the pod. And this week it's exciting because it's a guy that I've been friendly with online for a few years now. And got a little piece of information I want to share with my listeners that this guy has a lot to do with from last year's live stream for The Cure. But it's also exciting because he's a first-time guest on the show. He's never been on Two Peas before, so I'm thrilled to have him. But let's say what's up to Phil Rood. What's up, dude? How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm good, man. It's good to be here. I'm same. I've known about you, and I know the first iteration of this show for a long time. It was kind of feel like we've danced around each other for a few years and kind of crossed over at a couple points, but it's good to finally sit down and do a show with you, man.
Yeah, same here, man. I love having first-time guests on, and it's always like really weird to me when it's somebody like yourself that I'm like so familiar with, and I'm like, have they never been on the show? Because I've been doing it for almost 7 years, but it turns out that you haven't, even though we've kind of been on the mic together and different stuff, predominantly with live stream for The Cure. But what I wanted to tell everyone, so we had a great time last year.
It was a lot of fun.
Live Stream for The Cure is an awesome event that we do every year. I help put on with Nick over there, and it's to raise money for cancer research. And for those of you that don't know, it's every May. And this past year, Phil saw to it to entice the listeners and the viewers to maybe donate some more money. What did you do, Phil? And also, where did that original end up? Because I know who has that.
Drew actually has the original. We'll get around to that. It was, I don't remember exactly what kicked it off, but there was something about hitting a certain goal. I couldn't even tell you what the dollar amount was. And during that segment, Titanic had come up a couple of times. And I believe in the chat, I just said, if we hit the goal, by the end of this segment, I will draw Gerald in the same way that Rose from Titanic was drawn, like one of the French girls. And lo and behold, that blew that fundraising goal out.
Yeah, you did it. And our mutual friend Drew from Real Feels, for some reason, has it.
He did it because we set a goal. The next day, I was on with Heather Welch from Sunshine and Power Cuts.
Yeah.
And we said, well, if our segment hits this dollar amount, then, the high bidder will get that. And Drew he swooped down on top of that.
Yeah.
Like it was raw meat, and he was a tiger.
Wow.
He wanted that. I like to think it's hanging in his house with a velvet rope around it. And he shows everybody.
No, I think it might be in his podcast space, which is strange, but it's fine. I love Drew, so if anybody was going to display that, I guess he's the best person to do so.
It seems appropriate.
But I didn't really have the beard then either, so you might have to update it.
Yeah, we may have to do something this year.
I feel like last year I just had kind of the 5 o'clock shadow thing going.
Yeah, I'll have to. I don't know. I'll have to take a look back at that and compare.
Oh man, but you're such a sport for doing that. Thanks so much. And
I'm not the one who was naked on the adult.
That's accurate. That's accurate. I just want everybody to know I did not pose for that. He did that, based on memory from video feed and whatnot. So I didn't pose for that.
I think. Well, look, talking about how much we know mutual people. Live stream for the Cure is the thing that always makes me realize like what a small space the podcasting space is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I know Gerald. I knew who Nick was, but then it's like, oh, Gerald and Nick, they put on this event, and Gerald knows my buddy Travis, TV's Travis, and he
Yep.
knows
Sure.
Brandon Cruz, and I know that, and
Right.
Kate from Ignorance Was Bliss, and there's all this crossover when you get to these big events,
Right.
and you just kind of go, oh yeah, there's so many mutuals. It's such a small space that you do run into people eventually.
Yeah, and everybody's so supportive too, which is great.
Yeah, it's a great community for
You'll
sure.
be like, oh, everybody's lifting everybody up, and especially when you have a show like mine, a format like mine. I mean, I have to have somebody in here every week, so it's cool to
Right,
get people to
right.
come in and help out. And now you're a part of that family too, which I love. I'm thrilled. So tell them real quick, man, before we dive into the top 5 tonight, a little bit about your show, because like I said, you're a first time guest, but you're doing the picture show now, right? So just
Yeah.
tell people a little bit about what that is and where they can find it real quick.
The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood is a show I do with my son, Austin. He's in his early 20s. So we have, it's kind of interesting to do a show with someone that he and I have always talked about movies since he was a little kid. I'm a huge movie fan, and he got into it, and doing the real movie nerd thing of breaking things down and analyzing everything. And so eventually we just put a microphone in front of us. But I love doing it with him because it just comes so natural. And also we have a weird generation gap in there that, for instance, our latest episode is about the Blues Brothers, which was a staple movie for me growing up that he had never heard of or was aware of its existence. So it was, just coming at it from 2 different places totally. And we have a lot of fun doing that. We've been doing that for 2.5, almost 3 years now.
That's great. So when you started it, was he in high school?
No, he was, I think, 19. He was, yeah. Let me do my math here. Yeah. It was about 19, and we just kind of started it on a whim with a movie that will show up on a list tonight.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So,
right.
yeah, and you can find that wherever you get podcasts, all the usual places. But just check it out. There's a lot of random movies, a lot of stuff. We alternate back and forth, bringing them to the show. We're currently doing a season of double features where I'll bring a movie and then he'll pick one that he thinks complements it, and then we'll switch. And we do a lot of theme stuff like that.
I love that. And as few things as special as like sharing movies and music with your kids, and kind of introducing them to stuff that you love, and really vice versa too. Like, if there's stuff they're into and they share it with you, and
100%. Yeah.
Really cool, man. Yeah. So, my son is 9, he'll be 10 this year, and I'm envious of that. And my daughter's 21 and she's in film school. And I like to think I have a little bit to do with that. Her love of movies, because we, over the years, we've shared movies together and talk about them all the time. So I think it's a really cool concept. Did Austin have anything to do with this list? Did you tell him what was going on tonight?
I made a big list of contenders and started narrowing it down. And then I did ask him for suggestions. Had dinner with him and my wife the other night and said, is there anything I'm missing here? And they threw a couple in.
Okay.
And then, I just kind of went over it with him before I got on the mic here and was like, what do you think of these? And, we have a lot of the similar taste, and, whatever our differences are, it was the same thing. Cause I introduced him to a lot of like my favorite stuff when he was, your son's 9, you're getting into that fun age where it's like, exactly. Ghostbusters in a couple years, you can start with some of the John Carpenter stuff. And,
exactly.
Like it's really a fun time.
And my wife's a little more lenient too. Like, we just went to see 65 with Adam Driver last weekend because the dinosaurs,
Oh yeah.
And tomorrow night we're going to see Shazam 2. Even though they're PG-13, he's kind of like in that age where it's pretty safe for the most part. So
yeah.
So tell everyone, Phil, Thanks so much for being here, man. And guys, make sure all of his information is going to be in the show notes. Make sure you check Phil out in Austin and go look up their show as well. Now, we do a top five show here, Phil. Tell everyone what the top five list is tonight, buddy.
Top 5 movie plot twists.
There you go. Now, I just want to give a caveat before we dive in any further. There will be spoilers galore on this episode. Anyone listening, I don't know what Phil's picks are. He doesn't know what my picks are. But I can assure you that the 5 movies that I have on my list, plus my honorable mentions, there are heavy plot devices that will be spoiled if you have not seen the movie. And I assume Phil's list is going to be much like that as well.
Yes.
So just spoiler alert up top. Now, Phil, before we dive into our 5s here. So without giving any of your titles away, tell me a little bit about your research for this. When we kind of settled on this topic, did you kind of know right away which ones you wanted to mention, or did you have to kind of refresh your memory a little bit?
I had a few that, there's a lot I think that I can't imagine some people don't come to mind with these immediately, but yeah, there's a few that I was like, oh, these are good. These are kicking off the list. And then it was just sort of, let me think about it a little bit more. And then you do the thing where you Google like movies with plot twists, and you just see what weird IMDb list comes up or whatever. Yeah. And you just sort of, pick through that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's one I hadn't thought of. I'm like, nah, that doesn't belong on this list at all or whatever. Sure. But yeah, I've kicked this list around the block for the past couple days, just honestly trying to narrow it to the 5.
Yeah,
is really the hard part, because there's a lot of these that I really love.
Yeah, you don't want to leave. You don't want to leave them out if they're some of your faves. It's a tough thing I do every week, man. I don't know why I do this to myself.
Yeah, you really do torture yourself, man.
But look, when I was coming up with my list, man, there's a few that jumped out to me right away, and they actually ended up being my top 3, really. The first 3 that I thought of, and I stuck with those.
Cool.
Now, this episode that I'm doing with you, Phil, is a couple weeks removed from an episode I did called our top 5 WTF moments in film.
Okay.
So I wanted to kind of keep that list separate, so I didn't repeat any of those. There's one in particular that was on that list that is arguably one of the greatest movie plot twists of all time. I'm not sure if you're going to bring it up. If not, I'll bring it up in my honorable mentions, but I didn't want to list that one because it was in my WTF episode that I just did. So I'm kind of tiptoeing around a couple different picks and trying to get creative to not have a ton of crossover in episodes so close together. But yeah, I'm excited to see what we do, man. I assume all of yours are ones that you didn't see coming the first time you saw it, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the big criteria for what I wanted was something that kind of recontextualizes the entire movie once it's revealed. It sort of changes everything we've seen up until then, or the context for it. So that's really kind of what I was aiming for, as opposed to just the shock value moment or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. It sounds like we had similar criteria. I know for sure that, and I'm sitting here looking at it on my other monitor here, and I'll tell you that all of these like floored me the first time I saw them. Like they were literally like, oh my God. And you're right, where it does just kind of twist literally the plot to where it's like not the same movie.
Right.
That you thought you were watching prior to
I can remember sitting in a theater after a movie ended, just kind of just soaking in what I had just seen. You know what I mean? Like that kind of blow your mind kind of reaction to it.
Yeah, like, oh my God. Yeah. No, for sure. It did something to me the first time I saw it. So I decided to be true to my memory there and put those in my list. So we're going to do our top 5 movie plot twist with Phil Rood, first time guest. Thanks so much for being here again, brother. I really appreciate it. I'm going to let you get us started, man. Absolutely, man. I'm going to let you get us started. What is your number 5 plot twist?
My number 5, I chose the 2016 Denis Villeneuve movie Arrival.
Yeah, you did.
That's a unbelievable sci-fi movie. Austin and I covered it last season. We did a whole season of sci-fi movies, and we kind of had to cut ourselves off at a certain point because we could just talk and pull that movie apart for days and days. The whole end where you understand that time is a circle, and she's grieving events that have not happened yet, and it just sets the entire thing back to the beginning in a way that it makes you want to immediately sit down and watch the movie
Yep.
end to end again, and watch it through such a different lens your second time around.
Yeah, I was going to say
Jeremy
this is a
Renner.
movie that I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt you. I was say this is a movie that you just have you got to rewatch it. I mean, you absolutely have to because you're just like, and there'll probably be a couple other ones that'll come up that fit that criteria too. But it's
yeah,
like it just demands like, oh my god, I have to see that again, like to catch whatever you obviously missed the first time around.
right.
Yeah, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's just I love the atmosphere of the movie. It looks amazing. Jeremy Renner, Amy Adams are both great in that movie.
Mhm.
Just the whole thing, it's so much more than the plot twist. You know what I mean? It's just such a well-made movie, which was another one of my criteria of this is I want legitimately great movies that I love.
Right.
And this fits it 100%. And yeah, I don't know. It's the thing I run into. I almost didn't want to put this on my list because this movie is so hard to talk about
Yeah.
because of like what you said. Like you just have to see it. I can't
Yeah.
explain to you what's great about this movie
I agree.
or uh, even the mechanics of the time language because it's so high concept and weird
Yeah.
and beautiful at the same time. But you almost have to experience it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Great pick. It was one that I considered and I thought about it, but it didn't end up making my list. But I do love this movie. Also, a little caveat: we just recently did our top 5 Oscar snubs, the worst snubs of all time, and Amy Adams for this movie is up there for me.
Amy
Can't
Adams
believe,
is so great that
yeah,
it is like, how does she not,
I can't
grab
believe it.
something for this? Yeah,
Yeah, I can't believe it. So good in that movie, and really in her career period. But
for sure.
probably her best performance, or probably like top 3 best performances of
It's the
hers.
one that connects with me the most, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So great pick. So Arrival's your number 5.
Yes,
My
sir.
number 5, I decided to go with it because now it could be seen problematic to even talk about this person. I'm not going to mention their real name because he's an asshole. But it's the twist in The Usual Suspects, and
Yes. Yeah.
from 1995, Bryan Singer, just a great like crime thriller, and the twist at the end of the movie when we discover who Kaiser Sose is, who we had our unreliable narrator the
Yes.
entire movie, Verbal Kent. And again, I won't mention the actor's name, but aside from who the actor is, I did not see this coming. It was so creative how Verbal was telling the story in the police station throughout the duration of the movie with, with the assistance of flashbacks and stuff like that. And then the way it all kind of ties together as a mystery for us almost as the investigators on the different things that he was just basically pulling from the room to like
Yeah.
fabricate his
It's all
story.
on the bulletin board. Yeah.
And you just sit there and you go, wait a second, what? And you're like, and it's filmed beautifully to where it just kind of intertwines all that stuff. And you're just literally, it's one of those movies where you literally just sit there at the end and you go, oh my God, like, how did I not see
Yeah.
that? It was literally right in front of me. It's almost like you hear some of these filmmakers who they'll like put like the plot twist or the little plot devices in like the opening credits,
Oh, yeah.
like to
Yeah.
kind of like hint to stuff that's going to happen, but you don't catch it because you don't know what you're watching yet. But this one, it was like literally is in the room
It's
where
just
he
there. Yeah.
was. Yeah. Every time that cut to him in the room as a witness or whatever being questioned, everything's right there for you to kind of put the pieces together, but you just don't do it because we don't really watch movies like that. So yeah, I thought it was genius, and it's remained one of the best movie endings, one of the best plot twists in my opinion. So, and
Yeah.
I love,
It's a great one.
and
My
it
favorite thing
was
in that movie. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say I'll let you retort, but it hit at the right time too because this was 1995,
Yeah.
and I've often said between like the years 94 and 96, maybe 97 is really when I became just like a cinephile. So everything that came out like in that 3-year period that I saw in the theater, which this one was one of them, I just have such fond memories of. It just stuck with me,
Sure.
and especially a plot twist like this. But what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that my favorite thing in that movie is when they go to arrest Kevin Pollak and they
Uh-huh.
bring like, 30 cops in to grab this one unarmed guy, and he turns around and he goes, "You think you brought enough guys?" The way his whole delivery of that is just like, there's like this weird comedy that runs throughout that movie, with the police lineups and everything. But I'm
no
right there
doubt.
with you. I think you and I are around the same age, and the 90s, you were starting to see stuff with like twist endings, and it kind of was hitting me at the same time where it was like, oh, a movie can totally be a magic trick where you're misdirected and
Mhm.
kind of played a trick on, and it kind of changes how you start looking at movies and how you start um thinking about creating things. I think
Sure.
so yeah, this is right in that same wheelhouse where I saw
Absolutely.
this movie. I didn't see it in theaters, but I remember a friend like giving that to me, and it was the same time we were like handing around VHS tapes of like Tarantino movies, and kind of
Mhm.
going, "Oh, this is all cool," and just being like, "You got to sit down and watch this,"
Yeah.
and it just, holy shit, what did I just see? This
Yeah.
kind of ending.
And something that gets lost too in the shuffle, I feel like, is that no matter how hard you try, it's so easy to get spoiled these days. Like if the
Yeah,
usual suspects had come out in 2022 or 23, it just would, in my opinion, I just don't feel like it would have had the same effect because you know what I mean? There would have been
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
all over
yeah.
the place and like memes of it. And like, you know what I mean? It would just been harder to kind of keep the mystery intact, but
It for sure.
it was a different time, man, in the 80s and
There's a
90s.
weird thing you have to do now is like, I remember when you reviewed The Menu when it first came out, and you were like, just go see this before somebody ruins it for you, because it is
Exactly. Yeah.
sort of like, and when I saw The Menu, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Like,
Mhm.
you have to experience this without anybody. You have to go in cold and all this kind of thing. It's just
Yeah.
hard to do now. Yeah.
It's so tough, man. But yeah, so the usual suspects from 1995 is my number 5. Phil,
Solid
we are
pick,
over to
man.
you. Thanks, brother. Over to you for number 4, buddy.
Number 4, I'm gonna go with, speaking of magic tricks, The Prestige from
Hey.
2006. This is the movie that solidified my love of Christopher Nolan, and made me just kind of go, I will see anything this guy makes, because this movie is one of those that uh, faded to black and credits started rolling, and I just sat there in my seat, staring ahead, going, "What that?" There's
Exactly. Yeah.
Nikola Tesla, played by David Bowie, and just so many weird pieces of the puzzle constantly moving, that by the end of it, there's so many reveals. It's like, oh, Christian Bale is twins. And that's a big reveal, but the biggest reveal is that Hugh Jackman was the bad guy the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many twists and turns in the plot, in the characters, and in everything going on. It's a wonderful movie about obsession,
Mhm.
that just executes a really complicated plot flawlessly, I think.
I agree. It's in my honorable mentions. It was, we're talking about ordering these things, and this was a tough list to come up with, but it ended up falling at what would be my number 7, basically. But I love it. It's one of my favorite Nolan films, and this is like, yes, it's a plot. It's like actually like 2 plot twists really at the end, but
Yeah,
it's like also like just a thinking Pete. Like it's a thinker. Like yeah,
absolutely.
it's a
Yeah,
plot twist, but it's not. It happens almost too seamlessly to where you
yeah,
almost don't even catch it really. Like you just go, like, what? Can somebody explain that to me?
right.
And you go, and if it was in the era of YouTube, which I mean, it was, getting there,
Right
but it would
around
be
there.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be one of those where you would come home and be like, the Prestige ending, explain, tell me
Yep.
what the hell is
Yes.
going on,
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, especially upon rewatches and stuff,
Yeah.
it's just great how it's kind of this like commentary about the duality of man too, and how,
Yeah.
you got Bale's twins, and then you have how Jackman had this guy, posing as him, like clone basically.
Oh, that's the funniest part.
Yeah, it's great,
He
man.
gets the drunk to, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so good, and ScarJo's in
Uh,
there. I mean, it's just a great movie. One of my
Michael
favorite.
Caine. I mean,
Yeah,
everybody's in that. Rebecca Hall is really
yeah,
good in that. It's
mhm,
a unreal cast, man.
yeah. I agree, man. Great pick. It's in my honorable mentions. Now,
Cool.
look, dude, my number 4 is possibly the most depressing movie ending of all time.
Oh man.
So I apologize.
Whoa.
But, I know it's based on a book, and forgive me, there may have even been an iteration of this movie prior to this one. I don't remember if there was, maybe like a TV movie or something. I feel like there was something out there besides the book. But anyway, it's from 2007, the one I'm talking about, and it's The Mist, directed by
Oh,
Frank
geez.
Darabont.
Yeah.
You've seen this?
I love this movie. Yeah.
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 Bro, like, I don't know how else to say it. Just like I would say this is probably the most devastating plot twist.
It's like
It's,
nihilistic, even by Stephen King
yeah,
standards,
yeah.
like it's wild. Yeah.
I mean, Thomas Jane plays the guy, kind of the patriarch, and they get out of this like just crazy situation. Finally, he escapes with 4 other people, one of which is his own son. And again, I said this at the top, but tons of spoilers in here. But they think the creatures are coming after them in the mist, in the fog.
Yeah.
They can't see; they can only kind of hear what's going on, and they know it's just it would be a brutal death. Like it would just be, just you couldn't even fathom how the pain and everything that would come along with it. So Thomas Jane says, "All right, you know what? We're going to have to kill ourselves. Like we shouldn't go through this. Like this is it. We're done." Puts the bullets in the gun. Turns out there's only 4 bullets. So he's like, "You know what? I'm gonna sacrifice all you guys. Let all you guys go to spare you, and I'll face the creatures." So it turns out he kills everybody, including his own kid. And then when the mist kind of dissipates, it was just the military coming to save them. It wasn't
Yeah.
the creatures, and the situation had kind of been solved at that point. And that's how the movie leaves you, with him
It's
literally
brutal.
screaming in tears on the
Yes.
ground. And I'm just like, and I didn't know the book, when I saw this the first time, and I just couldn't believe, like, I was just like, oh my God, what a fucking twist, because I thought, especially knowing that Stephen King was the writer, I'm thinking, well, yeah, Thomas Jane's going to go out there. It's going to cut to black because it doesn't want to show us what the creatures do, or like he is going to get,
Right.
whatever. But for it to take that like emotional, like gut punch turn for a Stephen King wasn't really in his repertoire at that time.
No.
It was a very emotional way to end it. And it's just devastating. I mean, to this day, every time I think about it, I'm just like heartbroken, of that character's fate there. So
That's an awesome pick, because I thought high and low of Stephen King. What's a Stephen King? I love The Shining. I love Misery. That, and for some reason this one didn't dawn on me. But I did land a King on my honorable mention list.
Okay.
We'll get to that later. But
right,
no,
cool.
I do love The Mist, and I rewatched it last year. I think it's a great monster movie. I think
Was there something prior to it?
I don't
or
know.
No?
There might have been like a Sci-Fi Channel thing. I
I don't know
want to
why
say.
I think there was some, but I could just be thinking that maybe there's been one since then, like a
It could be.
remake. Yeah, but
It
anyway,
could be. But
yeah,
I
just
love
devastating,
Frank
man.
Darabont. I love there's a lot of Walking Dead actors in here, because it was just a few years before Darabont was show running that. So
Sure.
it's a really cool kind of time capsule movie. It's very much of the time it was made in. The CGI isn't quite there, but it kind of also doesn't matter. It's just a really
Right.
solid horror movie that, man, that ending gets me every time, man. It really does.
It really is, man.
That's an
It's
awesome pick. Yeah.
it's crazy, man. So The Mist is my number 4, and we're over to you for your 3, Phil. What do you got?
I am going with 10 Cloverfield Lane as my number 3. I love this one because it throws a couple of twists at you. The first is they kind of lean into John Goodman is a crazy man who's holding this woman hostage and claiming there's an alien invasion. And then they put the twist on it. Oh, no, there really is an alien invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And so it resets the reality. And then it's like another twist that says, oh, no, it's both, because John Goodman is also crazy on top of the alien invasion. And you have to pick which crazy you want to live with. And I think the one thing that sort of takes away from these plot twists is that they relabeled this movie as a Cloverfield movie. So you knew it was about aliens going in instead of kind of letting that just sort of be its own surprise.
Right.
But I do love this movie. I think it's a great sort of suspenseful sci-fi thriller. And, who doesn't love John Goodman? It's just whatever kind of big performance he's putting on here. Even when he's scary, you love John Goodman. So
Yeah, he's so good, man. I thought he could have. I thought he could have easily been nominated for this role, man. I mean, he absolutely slayed this role. So good. And you're right. It's like
he has range all over the place in this role.
Yeah.
Like he's the nice guy. He's the caretaker. He's the scary psychopathic guy. It's a lot of things.
Yep. I think it's a great pick, man. That's one that I actually want to revisit. And we were talking about watching movies with my son, and I think I'm going to do the original Cloverfield with him probably in the next year or two.
Yeah.
Maybe like around 11 or so. I'm going to let him watch that, and then we'll follow up with this. So I can't wait to kind of watch those movies with him too. Creature features and just the whole thing.
I mean, the first one's a kaiju movie. It's like a Godzilla movie. It's great. It's really, we watched both of these on our show last October for Halloween. And they hold up really well. They're really, really fun movies to sit down with.
Cool, man. So 10 Cloverfield Lane, you're number 3. I didn't mean to do this. I'm sitting here looking at my list. I'm like, I guess I'm doing this, but I don't think. Well, no, I guess all of mine are kind of like the plot twist comes in the final act of the movie. But this one, now look, I'm a horror guy. I got the sign behind me if there's any doubt in your mind. It's my favorite genre of film. Now, this franchise has like gone downhill since the original, like a little bit each time. It gets a little worse, in my opinion. There's some good scenes and stuff like that, but nothing will match up to the original Saw from 2004. And the ending of Saw.
Oh, yeah.
When Jigsaw basically, I mean, we find out that he was basically the corpse that was on the floor the whole time in the rest stop bathroom or whatever. And then he just like stands up, you're like, what? And it goes slow motion. And it's like, you realize he was orchestrating the whole game the whole time and was just literally playing dead throughout the entire movie.
It's been a while since I've seen Saw, and I didn't see any of the sequels, but I do. It took me a minute to remember it, but it's like, oh yeah, there's like as Carrie Elway's like saw his foot off, and he drives him to the extremes, and he's like, no, I was here the whole time.
I was right here, man. Yeah. He gets up and then he says game over and shuts the door, and then a franchise is born. I mean, they've done like 10 of them. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, horror franchises aren't a new thing, but it was just so inventive and so innovative, and like it just really took everybody by surprise, because you think you're kind of watching this like diabolical psychological horror movie, which I mean you are, but you just didn't expect. It didn't seem like the kind of movie that would come with like a huge twist. You know what I mean? You were just going to kind of find out who the killer was or like whatever, but yeah, Jigsaw, and we kind of learned his whole deal. And then, like I said, the whole franchise has kind of been built around that. And Tobin Bell, who portrays Jigsaw and the voice of Jigsaw, is now a horror icon. And it all started here. And Lee Winnell is the other guy in the bathroom, and he's a very famous horror director now. He just did The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss a couple years ago.
Oh, that movie's solid as hell. That's really good.
Yeah. So a lot of great kind of like lineage in the horror genre too that started here in 2004 with Saw. But I just remember seeing it in a theater, and me and my buddy Bob that I saw it with, we were just like, we couldn't believe. I mean, we were just like, this is the greatest shit I've ever seen in my life. Like, they really got us, And we're like, when can we bring people to see this, so we can watch their minds be blown as it's happening, So
that's great.
It's nice to revisit it with people that haven't seen it for that reason too. So the ending of Saw is my number 3, and we are up to our runner-ups.
Good deal.
Phil Rood, what do you got over there at number 2, man?
Number 2, I got a movie I feel like is overlooked in the Denzel Washington filmography, and I chose Book of Eli from 2010. I think this movie is great in its themes. It's got themes about spirituality. It's got themes of exploiting spirituality for gain. Gary Oldman's he's the GOAT anyway, but he's just such a great bad guy in this. This movie has Tom Waits. This movie has one of the Dumbledores and Mila Kunis. But the big twist at the end, when you figure out the Bible is useless to everyone else because it's in Braille and Eli is blind and
I
he is
know.
legitimately a prophet of God. And
Yeah,
it
no,
is
it's great.
just, I love the way this movie ties up all these threads and brings them home in the most inventive way, and sort of seals up the lesson of spirituality that it's trying to get across to people. And I just also think it's just I love watching Denzel be a badass. And there's some great action scenes in this, and also I just think it's a great, largely quiet performance from him. He's
Mhm.
playing this kind of stoic guy. I love Denzel Washington anyway, and Book of Eli is just, I think it's a powerhouse movie.
Yeah, great pick. It's one that I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah,
But I did see it on a couple lists, and I do remember being taken aback by the kind of twist there about that he was blind,
yeah.
and you can't go wrong with Denzel, man.
No, I mean, even like a bad Denzel movie, you're like, well, at least we got Denzel here. It's a really
Exactly.
good time, man.
You're like, "That was pretty good." Yeah.
he's
No, I agree
he's
with you, man.
he's one of the greatest. Yeah,
So, Book of Eli is your number 2. There you go. It's
number
one that I need
two.
to revisit. I like it.
I
So, my
recommend
number t
revisiting. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I need to for sure. I love that movie, though. So, for me, man, it's one of my all-time faves. It's one of my favorite filmmakers. It's got one of my favorite actors of all time in it. It's got a mind-bending plot twist, which really makes you kinda question the things that you had seen leading up to it, and the whole kinda like what you said at the beginning of this episode, the whole kinda structure of the movie changes once the twist comes in. But it's, 1999's Fight Club by Mr. David Fincher. Brad
Uh,
Pitt.
let let me kick my
Go
number
ahead.
one out there because that is my number one. That's our crossover.
That's our crossover, man. That's fine. I'm glad. I mean,
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
I'll let you talk about it too, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're kind of all these are kind of hit me the same way in terms of like I didn't see him coming, and this is possibly the biggest one that I just didn't see coming. Like
Yeah.
Fincher gave us little puzzle pieces and little clues, but you see him on rewatches, but the initial viewing, you just kind of think it's this like weird friendship thing, mentor protege kind of thing that's being formed throughout it. And then Brad Pitt's charisma, especially. I mean, Edward
Yeah.
Norton does great in this movie too, but Pitt's charisma is Tyler Durden, and he's just so fucking cool and like mysterious and like I don't know. I was just kind of drawn to that as a viewer that I didn't even think about what ends up happening. And then when it does, it's just like, oh my god! And you just start replaying all the different things in your mind, and I love this movie. It's my second favorite Fincher, only to Seven. Maybe Social Networks in there too.
Yeah. I'm right in that same wheelhouse of
Yeah,
Top Fincher as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no doubt, man. So yeah, Fight Club's my number 2, and you got it number 1, so you
I
must have similar feelings.
Yeah, Fight Club is just a kind of an all-time favorite for me because it again, of the time I saw it, of the time it hit me. It's on the heels of, spoiler alert to my runner-up, The Sixth Sense. This time in the 90s, Usual Suspects right before that. Twist endings were huge in the 90s, but so few of them I think did it as well as something like Fight Club. This was a movie my wife saw it. We weren't living together. We weren't married at the time either. We weren't married and living separately. but but she had told me, she's like, you gotta check this movie out when you get off work one night, and you got time. And then I saw it and called her. It was like, you unbelievable movie. And then we watched it together, and that's when we were going, there's the yin yang coffee table, that's both sides of him, that's and calling out all the little things that we could see
Mm,
in the movie that were, and then we got to the end of it and we were like, they were telling us the whole time what was going,
yep,
and
yep.
since then I've read the book, and this is one of those things where I love the book, but honestly the twist, we're talking about plot twists, I think it has so much more impact in the movie, the way the movie handles it as opposed to the book. It's just one of the all-time great shell shock moments for me, and part of just such a unique and great movie that is one of my all-time favorites. That's why this was the first movie Austin and I reviewed on our podcast, was
Yeah.
because I was introducing him to this movie
Yeah.
that he had heard me rave about for years. And I'm like, sit down, we're watching this movie, and then we're going to talk about it. And we spontaneously started the podcast on the back of Fight Club. So,
I went to see this movie, and it was before my first wife. It was before I had gotten married, though. It was about a year before we got married. And I said, you got to go see this with me. I went because I went to see it with a buddy of mine.
yeah.
So I got her to come along for my second viewing. Didn't tell her anything, and her dad came. We're friendly or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. There's action in it. Like, he'll like it, whatever. And I could just remember after the movie, my girlfriend's dad going, "What the fuck was that? Like, what did you bring me to see?" And that just perfectly kind of sums up Fight Club when you see it that first time. You
I'm
just
looking
don't
at
really
meatloaf
know.
with tits. I'm looking at, like,
you just don't really know what you saw. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So that's your number one.
Yes,
that was
sir.
my number two. So I guess the only thing left to reveal is my number one. And you mentioned it. It's The Sixth Sense. M. Night.
It's hard not to put it on the list. Yeah.
M. Night Shyamalan. It's made him a name. It made him the plot twist person. This poor guy, everything he's ever done since this movie, people are like, is it going to be as good of a twist? And spoiler alert, it will not be. I mean, this will not be, right? Especially because of the time when it came out, like kind of what we were saying before. Like I just saw Knock at the Cabin this year. It's really good. And this one,
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, Knock at the Cabin doesn't really have a plot twist, which kind of is the plot twist because it's a Shyamalan movie in a roundabout way. But The Sixth Sense, I remember watching it with my grandmother the first time, and she is a like Nancy Drew, like Matlock, like Murder She Wrote. Like she was one of those people. Yeah, she was one of those people that would figure out anything. Like you couldn't get anything past her. Very rarely she'd figure out who the killer was on all these NCIS shows, like all that shit. She knew all that, right? But she did not figure out The Sixth Sense, and she was floored by that. We're watching it at her house, and she's floored by it. So was I. I had to watch it again shortly thereafter just to kind of catch the stuff that Shyamalan puts in there that, again, kind of tells us, but we just don't pick up on it that first viewing. But it was just such an inventive way to like tell a ghost story, because essentially it's a ghost story, but it's kind of told through the eyes of the ghost, in a weird way, which was a new thing. And it's still one of my favorites. I just actually introduced my son to this one I was telling you, Phil. So
that's
I started
great.
Started kind of showing him not, horror, necessarily, but he saw this one, he saw Signs, which he also really liked.
I love
just kind of starting to introduce him to stuff. But yeah, it's one of those that has your mouth open when it happens, and then you just kind of start replaying it in your mind a little bit. So you're a fan of this one too, I assume?
Yeah, I'm a Shyamalan apologist, man. I think he makes a lot more good movies than he gets credit for, and even his bad movies are interesting. I watched Old last year, and I'm like, that's not a great movie, but it's an interesting movie. And and I think his biggest sin is that he made The Sixth Sense first. He made his best movie first, and it's hard to follow that up.
I know. I feel bad for the guy.
Unbreakable's a close second for me, but I also love The Village a lot.
Yeah,
and Signs. This is a great movie. I think there's you got Toni Collette and Haley Joel Osment, and I think this is Bruce Willis's best dramatic performance by a mile. I think he's so good in this. It's so sad to see what's going on with him right now.
Yeah, I know. Bummer.
But we got these great performances in a movie like this where he really turned in some real character work. You know what I mean? It wasn't just Die Hard again or something like that. It was this. I felt like such a departure for him. But The Sixth Sense is great. It's a great ghost story. It's a great sort of. I think that's a great horror introduction for your kids. Yeah. Something that's scary but not gory and too adult and still grounded and kind of a positive ending to it too.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I love that when I revisit it, and I still like it, and I love seeing people's reaction when they find out. And it's kind of like what you said. It's crazy that the guy started with this movie. I mean, it was so good. It
Yeah.
was written so well. And to your point too, when it comes to Shyamalan, like on paper, all of this stuff is a home run. It's just how does it translate to cinema? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like even like The Happening is like laughable, but if you like read it, you know what I mean? Like it's like you said, it's interesting.
There's an idea behind it for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so there you go. So The Sixth Sense, my number one. Phil, we're gonna give some honorable mentions, and we'll shout out the fans online too and see what they had to say. Before we do that, let's take a quick promo break, and when we come back, we will wrap up with our honorable mentions. Everybody, sit tight. We will be right back. All right, man. You still doing okay over there?
Yeah.
All right, brother.
All good.
So when we come back in, I'll just have you wrap up your top 5 again, and then we'll give some honorables. And when you give your honorables, just keep it to 5 or less.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, brother. Welcome back, guys. Phil Rood is here from the picture show and drawing art of me naked in a Titanic setup. Here he is. So we just discussed our top 5 movie plot twist. Phil, just remind everybody what your 5 was again.
Number 5, I had Arrival from 2016. Number 4, I had The Prestige. Number 3 was 10 Cloverfield Lane. Number 2, I had The Book of Eli. And number 1 was David Fincher's Fight Club.
Nice list, man. My number 5 was The Usual Suspects. Number 4 was The Mist. Number 3 was Saw. My number 2 was Fight Club. And my number 1 was The Sixth Sense. So there we go. Phil, you got some honorables over there, buddy. What didn't quite crack your top 5 that you want to shout out?
Just barely off the list was your number 1, The Sixth Sense. But that and Fight Club, I was like, he's going to have him on there. I don't need to put him both on that. Yeah, yes. But aside from that one, I had The Shawshank Redemption. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Frank Darabont, I love the idea that, surprise, it's a Prison Break movie. I also had the Lego Movie. I love the reveal at the end that these are his dad's precious Legos.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And a plot twist that has been lost to time and prequels. The Empire Strikes Back, Luke, I Am Your Father, recontextualizes 2 whole movies, but that's a generational thing because that's not a surprise to anybody when they watch The Empire Strikes Back anymore. Younger kids see the prequels first. It's a whole different experience than when we were kids watching the Star Wars trilogy.
Oh, without a doubt. And that actually is the one I was talking about at the top of the episode. It was in my what the fuck moments.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I saw it initially, I was a kid.
It's a great one, yeah.
I was a kid and the internet wasn't even around then. I'm dating myself, but my dad's like, "You want to watch this?" And he knew. I mean, he was like, waiting to see what my reaction was, and it literally was like, "What the hell?"
Yeah,
it was a great plot twist, and like you said, it just changes the entire franchise, literally.
For sure.
So, my number 6 would have been Parasite, movie that came out a few years ago. One of my favorite movies of the last decade. It's a fairly recent film, but have you seen it? I don't want to spoil.
No, that's a big blind spot for me right now. I still
I'm going to hang tight. I'm going to hang tight, but there's something that happens roughly around the halfway point of this movie where it literally changes the entire landscape of the film. The first half of the movie, you settle in and you're like, okay, this is what this is going to be. And it's great. But then something happens and the rest of the movie is literally a nightmare. Like it's not even the fucking same movie that you're watching. And it's because of what you discover halfway through it. So I definitely recommend you give it a shot. You mentioned my number 7, which would have been The Prestige. My number 8 is a movie called Primal Fear. So Edward Norton showing up again.
Oh, I know that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reveal kind of in the last act of that he didn't really have a split personality and he was just, playing Richard Gere basically to get off,
Right.
So great performance by Norton turned in there. My number 9. My number 9 is came out a year later or the same year, but a few months later after The Sixth Sense, but it was The Others with Nicole Kidman.
Oh, I never saw that one. But that's a ghost story too, right?
Do you know the twist then? I don't want to tell you if you don't know.
I haven't paid enough attention to it, but
I'm not going to tell you. But it is a ghost story. It is a ghost story, and there is a twist in it. And I feel like it got a bad rap because it came out like 6 months after The Sixth Sense, and everybody was kind of like, well, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
But, And then my number 10 would have been a movie called Identity. Did you ever see Identity? It came
I
out in 2003.
I watched Identity like a year ago. Yeah.
Came out
John Cusack, right?
That's right, John Cusack. Came out in 2003, directed by James Mangold, who went on to do Logan and Walk the Line and a
Walk the
lot of other
Line.
great stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, I just love this movie too because the guy in the mental hospital is being questioned about the crime, and he's retelling the crime, and we're trying to figure out who the killer is as he's telling the story. And then the twist that we find out is that the story that he's telling, everything was in his mind. So all the characters are part of his personality, and including John Cusack as the detective or whatever. And he was actually the killer, the person that's been kind of telling us the story. So it was a mind bending, like kind of mind fuck kind of plot twist, but it really got me, and I love the Hitchcock nature of the film. And it's kind of a split movie. I've seen people hate it, and people like me love it.
The last half of that movie, after the reveal, it loses me. But up until you know what's going on, it's really engaging because you're like, "What the hell is going on? And why do they all know the same rhyme?" Like the
right.
When I was going up the stairs, I met a man who wasn't there.
Exactly.
It keeps repeating through, and it's real creepy and really weird. But it seems to, for me, it falls apart at the end a little bit. But it's a really engaging movie up until then.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get it.
It's a solid pick for sure because the twist is straight out of left field.
Yeah, for sure. It was just one of those mental ones that you just didn't really see coming, psychological,
Yeah.
All right, Phil. Well, that was a lot of fun, man. So how we end every episode is we head over to social media and we open up the old suggestion box and we see what the fans had to say over there. So I just said, what are some of the biggest movie plot twists of all time? So let's shout out some fans, Phil, and see if they mentioned any that we maybe didn't get to tonight. My buddy Michael, also a patron of the show, he says Primal Fear, Now You See Me, Fight Club, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Sixth Sense. That would be his top 5. No surprise here. Joey DiCarlo says Fight Club. Let's see. Brett from Dissect That Film says Fight Club, The Sixth Sense, The Village, and The Others. The Village, and I know you mentioned that you really like that one.
I like The Village a lot. Yeah.
I do too. Did you feel like Shyamalan kind of like went a little overboard with the plot twist at the end of that one though? Because there was kind of like 3 or 4
a twist on a twist on a twist on that one. Yes,
yeah,
it was. Yeah, it was. What do they call it? A hat on a hat, or gilding the lily a little bit. It was a lot of like. Now we're doing this, and now we're doing this. And it's just sort of like, calm down. Let's stay on one track here, man. But yeah.
You got a little plot twist.
The overall vibe of that movie, I dig a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Sometimes that's just a movie to put on when you're doing other stuff or working in the office or something. But yeah,
I really like that one too. Yeah. Let's see. Jared, patron and friend of the show, says The Usual Suspects, 7, Saw, The Crying Game, and Planet of the Apes from 1968.
Oh, Planet of the Apes is a great pick, man.
That's
I can't believe neither of us picked that one.
I thought about it, but I haven't seen it in so long. But I guess the plot twist is that it's Earth, right? Isn't that what the twist is? Yeah. And then The Crying Game, of course, was also a huge twist. If you saw that when it happened, you're like, what what?
I wasn't expecting that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Tony Dobish, patron in front of the show, says Old Boy, which is a good one.
Old Boy is a really good one too. Yeah.
That's another gut-wrenching one, He also says Soylent Green, The Mist, and Arlington Road. What do you think about those?
I don't know Arlington Road, but Soylent Green is super famous. Yeah. Soylent Green is people.
That's the one where they find out they're eating people.
Yeah, that's I was trying to think of older stuff, and for some reason I just hit a block of I kind of stayed in my movie era. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Obviously I did too, for the most part. Paul, our buddy from the Countdown over in Australia, he says The Usual Suspects, The Sixth Sense, and Frailty. Frailty is a good one that came up recently on my show, and I need to revisit it. It's the one with McConaughey. And
is it Kevin Bacon
it's got Matthew McConaughey, and I'm trying to remember what the actual twist is, but it's also like a man versus the devil movie too, because there's But yeah, I haven't seen it in so long, and it just came up on another episode I did recently
Yeah.
too. My guest brought it to the table. I need to revisit that one because I haven't seen it since it came out. But let's see. We just mentioned Travis, so here you go. Here's Travis Crawford's list. He says the usual suspects, the others: Confidence, Primal Fear, Old Boy, and Pandorum. And then he also says Sleepaway Camp. So I don't know Confidence. Do you?
I don't know that one. No.
I don't either. Sleepaway Camp's a good one, kind of in the vein of The Crying Game as well.
More horror. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great camp slasher, though, to this day, an 80s film that I love. Christianity, patron and friend of the show, says Old Boy, The Game, and Gone Girl. Gone Girl's a good one. It's one I considered.
Gone Girl is a good one. So is The Game. Early Fincher.
Fincher. Yeah.
With Michael Douglas. That movie's really solid too.
Yeah, Fincher loves the plot twist, apparently, but both of those are good ones too. Peter from Podstalgic and Cobra Kai says Primal Fear, but he's also going to say Basic with John Travolta and Samuel Jackson, which I've seen, but I don't know that I remember the plot twist.
I don't remember it. I know I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Let's see. I'll just do a couple more here. My friend Liz says Primal Fear, The Sixth Sense, Gone Girl, and the best one has got to be The Empire Strikes Back. I'm Your Father. And then let's end on, I got a couple patrons here, so let's end on them. David Powell, he's a great dude, but he always lists like 50 movies. So I'm going to give his top 3 here. He says Usual Suspects, 7, What's in the Box, and No Way Out, the Kevin Costner movie. That's a good film. That's Madeline Stowe and Anthony Quinn, I believe, as well. But yeah, that's a good one.
I never saw that one. But
yeah. And then Jay Talbot, we'll end on him. He says Predestination is his list. What's Predestination? I know it, but I can't replace it right now. I was hoping you'd be able to tell me what that was. Put you on the spot.
I'm useless here.
No,
I'm
you're
still
good,
hung
man.
up on. I can't believe I didn't think of Old Boy, because that is one that scarred me, man.
Yeah, that's a good one, and that's heavy material there too. Yeah. Well, there you go, man. So Phil Rood, this was a lot of fun, buddy. I appreciate it, and
It was.
I'm so glad you finally made your way over to the show, and hopefully you'll come back sooner than later, man, because it was a lot of fun.
Anytime, man. I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, brother.
The fact that I dragged my brain over coals trying to narrow it down to 5. That was so hard.
Sorry
well
to torture you, man, but you did great. You did great. All right, man. Just remind everybody where they can find you out there on social media, buddy.
I am at Phil Rood on Twitter, at Phil Rood 75 on Instagram, various other places. But check out The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood, wherever you get podcasts.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in this week. And thank you so much once again to Phil for being here. Guys, until next week, we will see you then. Until then, everybody, take care. All right, man. Don't hang up quite yet. I'm going to end the broadcast, but it's got to upload your file.
Okay.